He is a doctor, an ophthalmologist. He's also a junior senator. He is, I might say, the one Republican who was willing to go to places where Republicans don't usually speak. I admire him greatly for that. I want you to give him a warm welcome. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. Hey, Senator.
Hey, Bill. That applause was almost as good as Martin Short, but not quite as much. I don't know what I need to do.
No, you're never going to be. No one's going to be as funny as Martin Short. But I want to first congratulate you. You were on the cover of Time magazine a couple of weeks ago. Show the cover there. It says, "The most interesting man in politics." I guess that's the Washington version of our People magazine sexiest man alive. How has this changed your life?
Well, I think it must be a low bar in politics to be the most interesting. I don't even think you have to be very interesting to be the most interesting person in politics. So I'm not sure exactly what it means. That is completely true. Thanks a lot for reaffirming that, Bill.
But I still think you are because, you know, after the 2012 election, the Republicans kept saying they were going to have to do things to reach out to other than just white men if they were ever going to win another national election. You seem to be the only one who got that memo. Among the things you're doing is, no, it's true. Among the things you're doing is you want to restore voting rights to felons, which could increase, you know, a turnout for Democrats. How's that going on? Well, it could. How's that going over with your fellow Republicans?
Well, you know, the interesting thing about it is that we have 2 million people who can't vote. A friend of mine's brother 30 years ago grew marijuana plants in college, and apparently he had a green thumb, and he was very good at it, and he got a felony conviction, but he can't vote. And for 30 years, he's had to mark off a box on every application saying he's a convicted felon, and it's ruined his life. And I think of all these kids, particularly poor kids in our cities, who have no chance, can't afford bail, get pushed into bad deals. There was a story in the New Yorker about a month ago about Kalief Browder. He was accused of a crime. He spent 3 years in Rikers with no trial, and then they finally released him and said, "Oh, our bad. You know, we're not even going to charge you anymore. You're gone." But he spent 3 years in Rikers. We've got a lot of problems with criminal justice. Most of it stems from the war on drugs, though.
Well, I admire you for that position. And you can stop referring to me as your friend from college. And my life wasn't ruined by it, okay? It was just sidetracked. All right. So, but I mean, one reason, let's be honest, we have so many prisoners is because prison in this country, unlike most countries in the world, is a for-profit system. Do you think your party is too cozy with corporations? Mitt Romney says corporations are people. Are you on that page?
Well, you know, I think it's a fiscally conservative thing to want less people in prison, particularly nonviolent people, because it's extraordinarily expensive. So let's imagine you have somebody for a nonviolent crime in jail for 10 years, and you say, why don't we reduce that to 1 year or 6 months and let them get out on a work program and maybe train them to work while they're in for a short period of time if we have to do that, and then we would save so much money. So I think it's frankly a fiscally conservative, but it's also the compassionate thing. I think kids make mistakes. I made mistakes. I know you, Bill, made a lot of mistakes. You deserve a second chance.
You're completely correct about that. Okay, so let me ask you about the big story this week, which is I was just referring to in the monologue, which is the big deal that the president made with China to cap carbon. Now, I know you're from coal country, Kentucky, so obviously this is a bit of a sticky wicket for you, but I just want to know what your basic feeling is on climate change, because I know you're thinking of running for president, and in some states, you know, you could get independents like me. I've said that. I am available to the Rand Paul campaign, but not if I don't think you're seeing this issue realistically. What is your view on it?
I think the best way to do this is like, Bill, I think you're fading out here. I'm not sure I can hear the question. No, I'll give you the straight poop on this. There's abundant evidence that carbon is increasing and has increased since the industrial age. All I ask for is that the solution has to be a balanced solution and that you have to account for jobs and jobs lost by regulation. And I'm not against regulation. I think the environment has been cleaned up dramatically through regulations on emissions as well as clean water over the last 40 or 50 years. But I don't want to shut down all forms of energy such that thousands and thousands of people lose jobs. Plus, we're a growing population, and as we grow, we need more energy, and maybe cleaner energy will supplant less clean energy over time, and it already is. But I don't think that shutting down dramatically one form of energy is a good idea for an economy.
Well, that sounds like you're pretty open to renewable energy, which is great because, you know, when you use the job excuse, I mean, the truth is that new forms of technology create jobs, not destroy jobs. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, yeah, and here's a good example of where I think we could work together on it. I have a new bill that's going to be coming out in the next month or so, and it's going to be called the Deregulation of Alternative Fuels. So I'm for trying to get the government out of the way of converting your trucks from diesel to natural gas or from gasoline to ethanol. Try to get the government out there and let the marketplace take care of this, because some of these fuels are actually cheaper too. And if they're cheaper, then people will go for a cheaper alternative that also is cleaner for the environment. So I think there are ways that we can find a middle ground on this. But really, it gets so far out there, and it does almost get there with a religiosity that I don't think we need to have. And I think if we depict this as, oh my goodness,
you had me, now you're losing me. That's...
But I want to be honest with you, Bill.
Okay.
If we're going to say the Statue of Liberty's drowning, that's alarmist, and we can't get to.
Well, we're not saying it's drowning now. We're saying it could be drowning in the future. You know, the southern part of Florida, a lot of people down there, and you might need Florida to win an election.
Yeah.
Southern part of Florida is very worried about being underwater. They want to secede from the northern part of Florida, which doesn't care about global warming. You might think about that for the next election.
Yeah, and there's a lot of middle ground on this. And for example, like, I think we ought to protect the Ohio River. The Clean Water Act says you can't discharge pollutants into the waters, the navigable waters of the country. I fully support that. But what's happened over the last 40 years is they've defined dirt, and I'm not kidding you, clean dirt is defined as a pollutant, and my backyard is now a navigable river. Some of us see that as oppressive, and they see that as getting in our backyard and being a bully and putting people in jail for putting clean dirt to raise the elevation of their land, when I want them to protect the Everglades, the Ohio River, the Mississippi River, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, but I don't want them in my backyard turning leaves over and saying, hey, there's some black on the bottom of the leaves, therefore your backyard's a wetlands, and we're going to tell you what you can and can't do.
I don't think that's the main part of this issue, but I will concede that point, and let's move on to the areas where I think you and I have always been in agreement, which is ending the empire and ending the drug war. I always admired your father. He was willing to get booed by the base of his own party, which I think we all need to do, to talk truth to our own tribe. And when it comes to ending the empire, I mean, you said if I were president, I would lay out the reasoning of why ISIS is a threat to our national security and seek congressional authorization to destroy ISIS militarily. And that doesn't sound very Polish to me. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs said we need 80,000 troops on the ground to do that. I thought I could count on you to be against troops on the ground.
Yeah. I'm not for sending any troops into Iraq, and I will oppose sending any of our people back into Iraq. It was a mess from the beginning. I would have voted against the Iraq war. We wasted $1 trillion and thousands of lives. And I would say if there's one thing, that is a truth that the other side has trouble denying, is that every time we have toppled a secular dictator, chaos has ensued and radical Islam has become more of a threat. Whether it was Iraq, Libya, Syria, Egypt, every time it's gotten worse through our intervention. The reason why I think it's a little bit different now, and I think ISIS is worse because of our involvement in the Syrian civil war. So I voted against sending arms into the Syrian civil war. But why I've decided now we have to do something is I think that ISIS is now a threat to our embassy and to our consulate. And I think we do need to defend American interests, and there are lines that occasionally have to be drawn.
Okay, so last question. You said in 2000 the war on drugs is an abysmal failure and a waste of money. Are you still on that page?
I'm absolutely there, and I'll do everything to end the war on drugs. The war on drugs has become the most racially disparate outcome that you have in the entire country. Our prisons are full of black and brown kids. 3/4 of the people in prison are black or brown, and white kids are using drugs, Bill, as you know, are using drugs at the same rate as these other kids, but kids who have less means, less money, kids who are in areas where the police are patrolling, police are given monetary incentives to make arrests, monetary incentives for their own department. So I want to end the war on drugs because it's wrong for everybody, but particularly because poor people are caught up in this and their lives are ruined by it.
Music to my ears. Thank you, Senator Paul. I think it's only a good thing for America when I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for next time. Thank you. Rand Paul, everybody.